Hello, everybody, and happy Sunday afternoon. And here comes Winky. Come on, come on. She's bugging me for dinner and pay attention to me. Give me dinner. Scratch my belly. You're not being very helpful. I have to do my film. So anyway, I'm on here today to talk to you guys about a little safety issue, and I've talked about this before. It's about fuses and fire and stuff like that. So I've been working with these two Marshalls that I've been telling you about this last week. And I've also got this little Fender Princeton, probably it's a silver face Princeton non-reverb, probably like early 70s, maybe back into 69. But I pulled this out of that because it came in here, my friend and customer up there in Oklahoma City got it, and it had no tubes in it. Someone gave it to him in a deal, and there's no tubes in it. So first thing I do is pull it apart, check it, make sure everything's good, make sure nothing's burnt out. If I don't just try to power them up, I go through and check them first. So anyway, I pulled the fuse out of here. The back of this thing has the little label on there. It says fuse, slow blow, 125 volt, 1 amp, okay? And I hold in my hand a fuse that says fast blow, 3 amp. This is an automotive fuse, people. That does not go in a guitar amp, okay? An automotive fuse and a guitar amp fuse, although they look alike, they are not. One is a slow blow fuse, one is a fast blow fuse. The slow blow fuse is designed so that when you turn the amp on, you get a sudden surge in current that will exceed the value of the fuse. So you got a 1 amp fuse in here. When you flip it on, it's designed to go, say, 1.75 amps. When you turn it on, they know that it's going to do that. So the slow blow fuse will not immediately pop if it exceeds the circuit rating. What it will do is it will allow the amp to come up to turn on. The capacitors will dissipate, and it takes all of less than a second for this to happen, and then the current will drop back below the value of the fuse. So 1 amp fuse, that amp's running at about 0.75 amps, and that's idle current, all that. But putting a 3 amp fuse in that will potentially light the amplifier on fire, like literally burn it, like flames and everything, because the components that are in there, some of them are flammable. Also, they are, wires and coils and things and current going through them. And they're right next to this nice, pretty little metal case, which is covered with fabric and wood. And I have, in my time playing on stage, actually seen these go up in flames, because people do that and it burns the components up, the amp stops working, they've still got it plugged into the wall. It has not popped the fuse, which is the protection for the amp and the guitar player, because this thing can be hot because it can short to the chassis, which shorts to your fingers through the guitar strings and will kill you. So that is there to protect the amplifier, to protect the person plugged into the amplifier, and just basically to keep it safe and to protect the place from burning down because you've lit your amplifier on fire. And I have actually seen this happen. And so we've got someone with a 1 amp fuse putting a 3 amp fuse in it. That's fun, asking for trouble. So now, because I see that leads me to go through here and check all the components to make sure that the output transformer is not blown up, make sure that all the capacitors are okay and everything like that, because those are the components that will go pop if the fuse doesn't go pop when it's supposed to. So I have to go through there and check all of those components before I can put tubes in this thing and power it up. Okay, so that's my rant on fuses. And the reason why I'm on it isn't just because of that one. The two Marshalls that I've been working on, one of them, the JCM 900 dual reverb that I've been messing around with, I've discovered that it has a burned out output transformer, and the output transformer is fried along with several other components inside the amp that are also fried. And I was puzzled as to why that would happen until I pulled all the fuses out of the amp, and because the fuses hadn't failed, and I discovered why they hadn't failed, because they're 0.5 1/2 amp fuses, and that amplifier had 10 amp fuses in it. So again, it's lucky that it didn't light that thing on fire. And the same situation with this other Marshall behind me over here on the bench. That one had also takes 1/2 amp fuses. It had 4 amp fuses in place of 0.5 amp or 1/2 amp fuses. Being British, it says 500 milliamps on the back. For anybody that has a Marshall amp and doesn't understand that, 500 milliamps is 1/2 an amp. And don't go by the little label on the back of it that says this unit uses 120 volts and this many amps. That's the power it takes from the wall. That's not the fuse value. They are both different values. So pay attention very closely to the little labels that says what fuse to put in it. Do not exceed that. This amplifier back here, this Marshall on the wall, behind me by this wall, that one had the 4 amp fuses in it. They didn't fail. It's the one that had the capacitors that exploded inside the amp. And when I went to replace the capacitors, I flipped the circuit board upside down to replace the capacitors, and there's an area next to the capacitors where it's actually brown and bubbled, where it started to light itself on fire. It's right at the connections for the tube heater wiring, which is low voltage but very high current, and that area was brown. And I have to go in there and verify that the traces are not damaged and that there's nothing shorted before I try to power that amp up, because it had a nice sizzle thing going on. But that one blew up 3 capacitors and 3 resistors and a diode, literally burned them in half because somebody had stuck a 4 amp fuse in place of a 0.5 amp fuse. Do not do that. Now this same thing, folks, applies, and I know I sound like I'm chewing somebody's butt on here, but I can't reiterate this enough. I am a stickler for fire safety. When I moved into this house that I just bought, I had moved in here as a renter. The first thing I did was got permission from the landlord to put fire extinguishers, not smoke detectors, fire extinguisher bottles, fire bottles, in the house. They're all over the place. And he goes, yeah, do what you want. Do what you want. So I said, okay. So I've got one outside this door, outside my shop. I've got one in the bathroom. I've got them in the kitchen. There's one outside the living room, and there's one in the garage. They're all certified, brand new fire bottles mounted on the wall, ready to use. I do not want to be in a fire. So I'm very, very careful about those things. And that's why I get so picky about when stuff like this, when I see people do that. You're just looking for a reason to burn something up, and it's not good. So, like I said, this applies to your house. It applies to your car, whatever. You got a power strip, you're going to plug a bunch of stuff in at Christmas time, read the power strip. The little light switch on the power strip is a circuit breaker. It says next to that light switch how much current this thing is able to carry. Don't exceed that value. When you plug all those lights in, each of those lights on the package will tell you how much current it draws. Add that up. Plug it into something appropriate. Don't pile it into something and exceed that current value, because what will happen is it will melt that and it will light your house on fire. And the same thing applies when you're working in the garage and plug it in extension cords. You get these splitter things and plug in 9 extension cords. I was working in an aircraft facility in Georgia, and we had inside the aircraft pulled all the insulation blankets, like fiberglass insulation inside the airplane, pulled all that out and was working on the wiring on it behind the wall. And we were all, had all that stuff on the floor. Well, somebody decided they needed lights and a fan. So they ran an extension cord in there. They ran it in there, and then they piled all that insulation blankets on top of the extension cord and had a power strip with about 7 different things plugged into it. Lights and a fan and God knows what else. And they had insulation blankets on top of this. So it's generating heat, and then the blankets are holding the heat in. And we're all working in the airplane, and suddenly that thing caught on fire. It actually, poof, flames. It actually lit itself on fire. And before the circuit breaker that it was hooked to could pop, the inside of the airplane was on fire with 6 of us in the plane. And we were smart enough to kick the insulation blankets out of the way, which they were what was burning. So we kicked them out of the way, and we got outside the airplane and yanked the wire outside the door so that the fire would follow us out the door, and then we could unplug it. And luckily there was no injuries and no real severe damage to the aircraft. But all of that was done because somebody didn't pay attention to the current, the electrical current that's going through whatever it is that you're using. So I cannot reiterate this enough. If you're dealing with a guitar amp, electrical components, computers, lights, your house, whatever it is, pay attention to how much electricity you're putting through something, because it can hurt you. It can burn things up, and it can hurt you. And so be very, very close, pay attention to that. I know I've had this discussion with people before about phone chargers and things like that. And I was corrected, and when I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong, and I'm wrong. I was corrected by Alex. He had shown me that there was current coming through some of these charging devices when they're not in use. So when you're not using them, unplug them, because they are getting warm and they are doing a certain amount of current draw. And if that thing fails, and it fails in such a way that it shorts itself out, there's a fire waiting for you to happen when you're nice and sleepy in your bed. And this is not something you want. So anyway, sorry for my Sunday rant on fire safety. But you know what? That was 7 blown, 7 incorrect fuses. And down here on the floor is I'll move Winky just a second, and a 1966 Fender Twin that belongs to my customer, friend, and product endorsee, Zane, that plays my Bauer guitars, and he has one of my Bauer amp cabinets right now. That amp popped a fuse the other day. He had the right fuse in it. Well, I put the fuse in there because I worked on that amp. But the fuse did its job. He was in the middle of a set, and the amp shut off. And he said it just quit. And so I popped the fuse out, 2.5 amp fuse, it's blown. I have to order a fuse because I don't have 2.5 amp. I have 2 and 3, and you don't ever exceed the value. And if you put a 2 in there and turn it on, it'll pop because it's not enough. So anyway, I got to order a set of fuses for that thing. More than likely what had happened is he either had a power surge in the facility he was playing in, or one of the power tubes has a fault of some kind. And I'll have to test the power tubes. I'll have to open the amp up and get in there and check everything out and make sure that it's as it should be. But that's a case where the fuse did its job. The fuse popped, amp shuts off, no more current, everything's cool. Now you take that, set it aside, finish your show in an alternative fashion, which is what he did by plugging directly into the PA system and finishing the show. And then he brought the amp to the shop, which is the appropriate thing to do. So anyway, that's my Sunday rant on fire safety and fuses. They seem like such an insignificant little piece, but trust me, they are extremely important, very critical, and you have to pay attention. The engineers that designed these things tested the limits of the components inside the amplifier or whatever thing you're using, your toaster or whatever it is. These things have been tested to the limitations, and these are a safety device. They are there so that you don't exceed those limitations and end up in a situation where you can be hurt. So I don't want to see any of you guys hurt. That's why I'm on here. Sound like I'm chewing your butt, but I'm not trying to do that. So anyway, that is the Sunday butt chewing from our nice rainy day that turned out fairly. I was looking out the window to see if it's still raining. It turned out fairly sunny. It was just one of those rainy, lazy kind of days this morning. And so I ended up getting a late start on all this stuff. So anyway, from me and Winky getting chin scratchies, I'm going to go give her some chicken, and she's going to be really happy about that. and then I might get myself some chicken. So seems like a good idea. So next time I do a video, it will be a touch more interesting and a little bit less ass chewy, because I'm not trying to be Mr. Snooty and chew everybody's butt, but I'd really hate to see any of my friends and fans and all that fun jazz end up in a situation where they're hurt or killed or burned or whatever, because it's just not something that needs to happen. So happy Sunday to you all. God bless. Have a great week. And I thank you all so very much for watching these videos. And I hope that we can expand my audience and make some really interesting things going on. And I hope everybody loves it. And from me and Winky, see ya later. Bye.